Welcome to Marrakesh, welcome to the Policy Center for the New South, welcome to the Atlantic Dialogue, and welcome to you, General. Happy to see you here with the French name, Barre Seguin. So we're international from the beginning.
Yes.
But the problems we have, or the discussions we have, will be on the input of the Ukraine war on wider security dynamics. So how has the 22 invasion of Ukraine reshaped the NATO's military strategy?
Well, I think it's actually had a profound effect on NATO. NATO has essentially recommitted itself to a collective security after many years of kind of out-of-region operations. Still involved with NATO mission Iraq, which is a train, advise, and assist kind of mission for many years, obviously in Afghanistan. But this recommitment, this unified recommitment toward collective defense based on the shock of Russia's unlawful, atrocious invasion of Ukraine and the war that it's carrying on against Ukraine, and the devastation of infrastructure, cities, apartment buildings, hospitals, the unchecked killing of civilians, is something that I really don't think NATO anticipated returning to Europe in particular, and has really caused them to coalesce and unify around collective security. It's caused them to commit to higher spending levels for their respective militaries. They've coalesced around contributions to Ukraine, almost from every member state of NATO. It's caused the alliance to expand, and so countries that once it was inconceivable that they would step up and desire to become a part of the coalition. Finland is a great example. Hopefully Sweden here will follow.
That depends on the other NATO partner.
Yes.
Turkey.
Yes, and so hopefully all that will come to be. I'm pretty confident based on what I read that it will, but this was unimaginable.
It depends on the delivery of weapons to Turkey.
I think there will be a number of criteria that will need to be satisfied, I think, before ultimately that moves ahead.
But let me ask you, if you look at the situation today, if tomorrow, just let's look into the tea leaves, Russia decides out of an act of craziness to move into one of these Baltic states, then the question of NATO's reaction is called. Are the NATO forces in Europe, not talking about the United States, the Germans, French, Italian, do they have the equipment to react?
Well, so that would trigger an Article 5, and
yes.
So Article 5, if the territorial integrity of any one of the 31 now is violated, there's not necessarily any one European nation that has the ability to respond, but collectively, certainly the ability to respond is there. And let's not forget, since February of 2022, Russia's military, their ground power, has really been ground down in many ways. They've lost hundreds of tanks and mechanized vehicles. Their Air Force and their Navy hasn't been affected as much.
Because they're not that active either.
They're not that active either. And so, you're talking about a military that has allowed for a significant deterioration in capability via this unlawful invasion in Ukraine, and a military that's even had to draw many of their forces from traditional locations
and prisons.
In prisons, in order to get them in the fight, which leaves vulnerabilities and gaps elsewhere. So I think the likelihood, and I think the sense that NATO has coalesced around its commitment to Ukraine, the likelihood of what you described is minimal, and if it were to happen, then it certainly would be met with a collective response that Russia would be incapable of countering.
Since you're now in this peaceful foundation, the Marshall Fund Center, and not in uniform anymore, the question is the fever of helping Ukraine or the fever of arming NATO in Europe, in Washington, is not that high. I mean, there is not such a great interest as you have seen in the last discussions in Washington. So what do we do about this? The Americans have not the appetite anymore, at least part of the Republican Party in Washington or in the United States. So how do you keep up the spirit of being ready to go into Europe and into war there?
Yeah, so this is an invasion of a violation of an invasion of a sovereign country. It's
no, I mean in the United States.
Yeah,
there is reluctance to help Ukraine financially or militarily at the moment of one part of Congress. So if that is applied to Ukraine, how optimistic can you be, because you live in Germany, that there is a reaction from Washington? Well,
so everything I've read and been told, and from all of our close alignment with our policy teammates in Washington, the current administration remains absolutely committed to supporting Ukraine. And I think, we just heard this week about another tranche of funding that the Biden administration is working with Congress to fund for Ukraine.
I say connected to funding for the border controls.
There are going to be compromises and trade-offs, and we're still in a continuing resolution in the United States. We still don't have a fiscal year budget, which complicates things as well, or makes things certainly more challenging. But I believe the president when he said that for as long as it takes, and so his commitment will remain. The coalescing of and the influencing of Congress to approve and provide the money that the administration's requesting to continue to support Ukraine could become more of a challenge, especially as we're finding ourselves in an election year now, where divisions will probably be potentially greater over some issues, and I'm hopeful that it's not over Ukraine, because I believe that it is important to continue this support to a country that is now a EU and NATO aspirant, that has started dialogues or will shortly for European Union membership, that clearly has signaled and desires that they want to become part of the liberal Western democracy way of governance, and organizations that support and that they could contribute to in terms of economic prosperity, rule of law, the European Union, and their own defense, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So there's tremendous opportunity here, and I think Europe has got to continue. There was just a veto, per my understanding and what I read, by Hungary of some funding that the European Union.
Some funding is a very nice way of putting it. It's $50 billion.
Was going to commit.
Sorry, yes.
Yes, and so if United States finds itself politically where it's unable to contribute in the manner and the amounts, the magnitude that the country's been able to over the past almost 2 years now, then Europe is going to have to look to step up. And if Europe can't find the unity for that, I think we're going to find ourselves in a very challenging position with Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia. We're not at a point where either side is indicated any willingness to negotiate. It may come to a negotiated point, but right now the media reports that it appears to be somewhat of a stalemate in terms of progress for the Ukrainians in retaking the territory that they had hoped to have a breakthrough and retake.
But we could also argue that the stalemate may not be wonderful for Ukraine, but it's a disaster for Russia, because they had the idea in 3 days they could take Kiev, and they moved, I don't know how many tanks, hundreds of tanks towards Kiev, and thought, oh, this is a weekend entertainment exercise, and now they're in the second, maybe into on the third year. That is at least one success. It's not a great success, but at least the stalemate is already a success. So let me just ask you this question. Otherwise, we have to go to West Point. Or to Denver. The Air Force.
That's right.
Academy.
Colorado Springs.
I'm sorry, but it's not far.
Not far from Denver.
Yeah. Again, the question is, if something happens tomorrow, which I don't hope, and it's not likely, it will be very difficult, because the European forces are not up to what they should be. So how long does it take until you would say, again, tea leaves, we are ready? Now we are not ready. America is ready, but the Europeans are not ready.
Well, I mean, I think your chancellor, when he came out with his Zeitenwende speech, was a turning point. That truly was
saying now we are ready to give the 2%,
truly
which
was
we
a
have
turning
promised.
point. Yes, and others even greater already are spending at greater amounts. I know the defense industry throughout Europe is stepping up and is willing to do more. Part of what they need is commitments to longer-term contracts, but based on what's on the shelves currently in many countries, it's probably a good idea to have these longer-term contracts, these partnerships with industry that aren't just short-term, we need to resupply now. And
the tanks we delivered to Ukraine, we need to replace, but we need to do more.
155 munitions, I mean, there's all kinds of demands, and we have emerging technologies that are affecting what we're buying and how we're going to fight in the future. So the alliance remains strong. If something were to happen tomorrow, the alliance is prepared to counter whatever that might be, and realize militarily, as we talked about, it's a weakened Russia right now. They haven't had this kind of loss of ground force capability since World War II. And so you're talking about a military that and a strategic calculus that would put Russia in a very vulnerable position should, God forbid, something that could trigger Article 5 were to occur. So while many would argue that decisions that Mr. Putin makes are not rational, I think in his mind they are. And I think this would cross the line of any rational decision, whether you consider him a rational actor or not, that he might make. And we have very little understanding of his decision calculus, but this to me seems a very easy one to predict in terms of the outcome based on NATO force capability, NATO command and control integration, NATO advancement in terms of a military strategy, the document that talks about defending and deterring throughout the Euro-Atlantic region, Sakir's guidance, the kind of planning and integration that's gone on since Russia's invasion. This is a newly emerged, much stronger NATO, maybe not with hardware to hardware, piece per piece, but with overall capability, it's unmatched.
General, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Helmut. Great pleasure talking with you as well. Thank you.